mom to be accessible, particularly to people in my demographic, broadly defined, but would like to just ask anyone to ask whatever questions you might be thinking about as you decide who to vote for on February 5th, or if you've already decided to support my mom, but you're not quite sure where she stands on something and it's come up in the dining hall or here in Kayaks, thank you for having us. Or just with your families, your friends, and then please ask about that as well. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you. And certainly I urge everyone to take advantage of both hillblazers.com as well as hillary-clinton.com. One of the things that I think is really distinctive about this election, and hopefully henceforth, is that we have the opportunity to reach out to what the candidates are saying directly, their priorities are, their plans are, and how they're going to pay for everything. And please go onto my mom's website and go onto the other candidates' websites and become informed. And please vote. So much of the narrative these days is that young people are going to turn out, but we have to turn out to prove that true. So I hope we get educated. I hope I can help and do some of that today. And I hope on February 5th, all of you go to the polls or vote absentee. So please ask questions. So the question was, what are my mom's plans to make higher education more available and affordable to middle-income and lower-income families? And I'm so glad that's the first question to be asked across the street from WashU. My mom really believes her life would be different if she hadn't had the educational opportunities that she had. And she never could have gone to law school without loans, and she never could have taken the job that she took after law school, going to work for the Children's Defense Fund on behalf of abused and neglected kids, if she hadn't been able to initially borrow at 2% from the federal government, and then to repay her loan as a percentage of her disposable income, so 15% of her disposable income. If she had to worry about some absolute dollar amount, either to pay off her loan or service her loan, she never could have gone to work for the Children's Defense Fund, and her life would have looked profoundly different. I also probably wouldn't be standing here today. So this is fundamentally important to her as she thinks about the opportunities that she's had and how our system once again can really be the passport to people's dreams. On college affordability, she wants to do a few things. She wants a $3,500 a student a year tax credit for families to help families pay for their students to go to school. She wants to further increase the maximum Pell Grant available. She helped write and pass legislation that the president finally signed in the autumn, raising the maximum Pell Grant level to $5,400 over a student's lifetime. She wants to double that, so it would be $10,800 over a student's lifetime, and that Pell Grants would be available year-round. Right now they're not available in the summer, and a lot of people go to school in the summer. She wants to expand opportunities for national service, building on AmeriCorps, which is something my dad started, and I'm really proud of him for that, so that students could do national service to earn up to $10,000 a year for 2 years, so $20,000 to use that money to go to school. And she wants the federal government to get back into the business of direct lending, so that we have an institution that's accountable for what our students are being told, and like our current private lending structures have worked, and that we can control the interest rates, and that similarly as she benefited, the percentage that people would pay of their disposable income could be capped, so that people could take all sorts of different jobs when they get out. She also wants, if people go into public service jobs when they get out of school, for the service itself to count as loan repayment. So if you're willing to be a teacher, or a community police officer, or a volunteer firefighter, that the service itself will count as payment in kind. That's actually a really distinctive element of her college affordability plan, and one thing that I'm really proud of, because what better way to say that we value not only people's chance to go to school and do what they dream, but value the service that they would return to us. She also is completely committed to getting rid of the FAFSA reform. She thinks it's ridiculous that our families spend so many hours filling them out, and that it's really expensive for the federal government to process. She wants people to do something really simple, to check a box on their individual tax forms or on the family's tax forms, if individually or as a family they're applying for financial aid, and then the IRS will send you what federal aid you qualify for. That will save the federal government maybe up to $4 billion in terms of processing loan applications, and I'll save families valuable time. So that's what she wants to do on college affordability as well as on graduate school affordability. And that was the first question. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, sir. Well, I think, one, I'm really proud that my mom has tried to hold the government accountable. I mean, for instance, last spring she was the first person who was running for president to ask the White House and the Pentagon what their plans were to withdraw troops from Iraq. And they said they didn't want to tell her. And she said, I'm a member of the Armed Services Committee, you have to tell me. And they said they didn't want to tell her. And finally, they held a confidential briefing, and I only know what she said publicly, which is that they talked about a lot of things, but planning wasn't one of them. So even as a senator, as a New Yorker, I'm very proud of it. She's worked to hold our government accountable. It's been difficult, on the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue. She said she's absolutely committed to ending no-bid contracts, to reinstituting an old-fashioned idea of appointing qualified people for the jobs they hold, so we don't have someone who was the head of the Arabian Horse Association as the head of FEMA. And to bring more transparency to the government. I mean, particularly with the internet now. I mean, we should be welcoming scrutiny in everything that doesn't need to be classified for legitimate national security reasons. She said she wants to put online and make available and open. She's even proposed that we should have blogging in our government departments so that citizens can have serious questions answered in a real-time fashion, and that the Department of Interior blogger can talk about what's going on in Yellowstone or whatever might be relevant that day. So she's absolutely committed to getting back to both accountability and transparency. And given all that we need to fix quickly in our government, those will be important to ensure that we can move forward collectively. Well, a little bit of background, live and work in New York and generally have a private life, and hadn't done anything publicly on my own in the campaign until a few weeks ago, when I just recognized that this is the most important election of my lifetime. And for better or worse, my parents raised me to believe that being a good citizen was part of being a good person. And the part of being a good citizen was using whatever tools we had to engage. And that's voting, and for me that's my voice, and trying to talk to all of you about what you care about and why I think it's important that you all vote and hopefully vote for my mom. So I've only been doing this for a couple of weeks. I'm very open to thoughtful feedback and constructive criticism. But yes, I was with my mom actually at Tennessee State University the other day. So I was there, and I'm planning on going to as many schools as I can. And one thing I'm really proud of my mom for doing, and I think that she's unique among all the candidates in this part of what she wants to do to help a part of our higher education system that we don't talk about enough, is to invest $500 million in helping close the digital divide between our historically Black universities and colleges that still persist, so that federal funds would help with sort of IT infrastructure and computers to ensure that those institutions, like I'm sure WashU already has the benefit of doing, looks like it's in the 21st century. So yeah, I hope that I can talk to more people about things like that. Sure, in the back.
Hi, as a student who is going into the healthcare field, how will socialized medicine basically affect healthcare providers, and subsequently how will that have a long-term effect on the healthcare that is provided around the country?
Well, I don't know how socialized medicine would affect it. It's certainly not something that my mom, or to be fair, any Democrat is proposing, and it's certainly not something that any Republican is proposing.
However, a healthcare system affects.
However, a healthcare system affects. So what my mom has proposed is universal healthcare, and I do think it's important that it is both universal and not socialized medicine. Okay, so what does it mean to be universal? It means that everyone will have to be covered. And what does it mean that it's not socialized? It means that it's still privately provided health insurance, but overseen by the government insofar as people will have to be covered. So how will that work? What my mom has said is that if you have health care and you're happy with it, nothing changes. One thing that she learned in the early 1990s when she tried to get health care and I'm really proud that she was trying to get universal health care before it was fashionable, is that a lot of people have health care that they're happy with. Or even if they're not happy with it, the prospect of changing is too scary. So for, there are probably more than 100 million Americans who have health care who are happy with it, nothing will change. But if you were one of the 100 million who at some point doesn't have health care throughout the year, we talk a lot about the 47 million who are uninsured at any given one point in time, but there are 100 million people, a third of our country, who at some point won't have health insurance. Or you're like me and you have employer-provided health care, but you're not very happy with it. Yes, I hope that if I say that enough, it will slowly filter back to me. That, I will have the opportunity to go into the congressional plan. And the congressional plan is a little misnamed. Yes, it covers Congress, it covers my mom and her staff, but it also covers the 9 million people who work for the federal government. So there's already a system in place. It's not creating a new system, but the system is really a gateway. It enables, members of the federal government, members of Congress, to buy one of 250 different privately provided options. So I would now have the same, place of doing that as a congressional staff member would. And I could, at 27, make the choice that's best for me as a single, relatively healthy woman. My parents, with my dad's heart condition, can make the choice that's best for them, which is probably something else. If my grandmother at 88, wasn't happy with her Medicare, she could make a choice that was best for her. But no one could be denied coverage because of a pre-existing condition. And what my mom has said that is distinctive to her is that she wants mental health parity, mental health coverage in all of the options. And that if people can't afford the option that they want, they'll get a $3,500 a year tax credit, and the premium payments will be capped at a percentage of their income. Now, if you still can't afford health care, you'll be put on a Medicaid-like program, but everyone will be covered. But why is it important that everyone be covered? Well, we see, unfortunately, what happens now when we don't have a lot of people covered. And as you know, probably better than I do, if you're going into healthcare, the most expensive place that someone can receive healthcare in the system is in the emergency room. And so if people continue to not be covered, that's where they're going to continue to go for care. Not only for their cold, but as much as those of us who are young and healthy and probably would be the largest demographic who wouldn't buy insurance voluntarily, would think that we will continue to be young and healthy, well, something bad is going to happen. We're going to get pneumonia, we're going to get in a car accident, so it's going to be even more expensive to treat us. And we're all in these big pools that'll help drive the cost of insurance down, but we really need, as you said, to help drive the cost of healthcare provision down. And we can't have the hospitals continuing to subsidize people without health insurance getting health care in their emergency room. It means that costs are going to continue to go up for the rest of us, and it means that hospitals aren't really going to be able to invest where they need to, either in raising nursing salaries, for instance, so that we're attracting and retaining smart people in nursing, or investing in community-based healthcare or prevention programs. So not only for each of us do I think morally do we want universal healthcare, but to ensure that we get control of our costs and re-empower our hospitals, we need to ensure that everyone's covered. Well, I understand the concern. It's certainly something that I hear. I don't think that you should vote for my mom because it's my dad, and I don't think you should vote against her because it's my dad. I think that you should judge her on her own merits, and whether or not you think her policies and her relevant experience are what will really enable us to have the best president starting on January 20th, 2009, and going forward that we as Americans deserve. So I understand, the concern, and I appreciate that might be one of the ambient factors that you think about. But in a world where, as one of the people who introduced Emily and me to you today said, we have a war to end in Iraq, and I do think we want, at least as a Democrat, I hope it's the consensus now, universal health care, and we want to ensure that more people are enfranchised into higher education. But if you think my mom is best suited to do all of those things as well as to deal with whatever unforeseen events might happen, then I hope you vote for her. What she has said is that she does believe that marriage belongs to the state level. And she actively fought against the amendment that was proposed a couple years ago, the Defense of Marriage Amendment, that would have codified in our Constitution marriage is defined between a man and a woman. And she is so adamant about keeping it out of the sort of realm of that debate that she thinks it is more appropriately dealt with at the state level, and that unfortunately, if it were to be brought up at the federal level, it would send us back. So what she wants to do is to use the bully pulpit to advocate for us to all be kind of getting closer to what it means to have a more perfect union in this country, and that has many implications. Women still earn 77 cents on the dollar to men. Our civil rights department under this administration has a not good record on tracking down on workplace discrimination against women, against homosexuals across the board. So actually getting back to the civil rights department that enforces our workplace discrimination laws. And what she said is that as president, she would have the most direct control over the 9 million employees in the federal government, and that she would absolutely extend equal benefits to gay couples as to heterosexual couples. That she's committed to removing the discrimination in our federal tax code that is currently levied against gay couples. That she's committed to getting rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, so that people are able to serve honorably and judged based on their skills and not their sexual orientation in our military. And that she is a strong supporter of civil unions. And that she hopes that kind of by having a different tone in Washington and by making the moves that she could at the federal level, that will help encourage states that are maybe a little bit more ready than Missouri to really move forward. The question was, what initiatives will my mom take to combating global warming? One of the things that I really appreciate about my mom, is way of a preface, is her ability to see so many of our challenges as interrelated, and then so many of our solutions as being dynamic, as we think about what we need to do to really move us forward. So when she talks about global warming, she talks not only about global warming, but about security. It's not good for us to currently be borrowing money from the oil-producing countries to be buying oil from them. And that's not a smart security strategy. It's also not good for our physical health. Similarly, it is not good for our economy to be neglecting what she sees as the greatest source of new jobs, which will be the best long-term stimulus that we can have, and the greatest tool that we can have to help lift people out of poverty, namely green-collar jobs. So what does all of that mean on global warming? She wants to start investing aggressively in clean renewable energy technologies, so hydrogen and hydroelectric, geothermal, wind, and solar, to create jobs, sort of the upper echelon of the research arena, and to immediately start greening the 500,000 buildings in the federal government. We talk a lot about cars, and they're huge emitters, and I'm proud that my mom has voted consistently to raise the fuel standards, and it's now to 35 miles per hour. And she wants to get it to 50 miles per hour by 2035. That's great. But our buildings are much larger emitters of greenhouse gases. So the most immediate thing that we could do is to start greening our federal buildings and to change our tax codes to incentivize businesses to do the same and families to do the same, and to give assistance to the 20 million low-income families so that they could do the same. What does that mean? Glazing the windows, better insulation, greening the roofs, linking into the wind turbines that hopefully you'll have on the Great Plains. And by doing that, you'll create millions of jobs. Millions of jobs training people to do these jobs, and millions of jobs for the people doing the jobs. You're going to have people who live glazing the windows and changing the light bulbs and fixing the static. And that is good for all of us, right? That we would have a source of new jobs in this country. In the 1990s, we had more people lifted out of poverty than at any point in our history, largely because we created almost 23 million new jobs. So it's smart for our global warming mitigation and smart for our economy. She's also committed to having the United States actually lead in the next generation of Kyoto negotiations. It's really unfortunate that the president withdrew the United States from the Kyoto Protocol. It's also important to recognize that Kyoto is up for renewal in 2010, and that what my mom has said is that she wants to send such a clear signal to the world that we're back in the business of cooperating and leading on issues like global warming, that she would lead personally negotiations with the European Union, Canada, as well as China and India and South Africa and Brazil around what the next generation of Kyoto Protocol really looks like, and that she would meet every 3 months with the leaders until they got something done. That's actually how we got the acid rain convention done in the 1980s. It was, for whatever you think about Margaret Thatcher and her policies within Great Britain, she really was a visionary leader on getting the protocols to help mitigate effects and in the continuance of acid rain. So it's both what my mom wants to do at home, kind of comprehensively on, yes, higher fuel standards and more importantly, greening our buildings and creating new jobs, but also the role that she wants to see the United States play abroad. Another thing that she's talked about is having the government issue $20 billion of what she's called green vehicle bonds to help incentivize Detroit to come up with what the next generation car looks like. I mean, right now, if Mr. Ford were to come back and look at a car that bore his name, a lot would look profoundly different than anything he probably could have imagined. And then he would open the hood and he'd see the internal combustion engine. It hasn't changed a lot in 100 years. We know that American car companies make cars in Brazil that run on Brazilian sugarcane ethanol that are far in excess of 35 miles an hour. We should not only incentivize those companies to bring those cars to our shores, but we should help them come up with the car of the future that has 100 miles of gallon of ethanol or biodiesel or biofuel. So she wants to do a lot, I think, that's pretty innovative and that we should all support. We don't see past February 5th. And I say that really seriously. I mean, I don't take anything for granted. And certainly my mother doesn't take anything for granted. And she's working for every vote. And on February 5th, we'll look toward February 12th. Sure. Well, it's not really, yeah. Well, thanks. What my mom has said is that as soon as she would be elected, if she were given that privilege, if she would ask distinguished Americans of both parties, and she herself would travel around the world, even before she was inaugurated, with two clear messages. One, the era of cowboy diplomacy is over. And two, the United States is back into the business of cooperating with the world. So trying to set up the architecture for things like the next generation Kyoto negotiations before she would even take office. And I think even the virtue of her traveling would send a very clear message. I think it's great that President Bush was in the Middle East a couple weeks ago. I think it's tragic that it was his first trip to the Middle East since he took office. He'd been to Iraq, but he'd never been to Israel. I think that is something that we need to overcome immediately, both in practical ways and reaching out on things like Kyoto or getting back to the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, reopening negotiations for what a real 21st century United Nations looks like, as well as just putting ourselves out there as Americans will send such a profoundly different message that we in the world need. Yeah. Sure. So the question was about immigration reform, and my mom is committed to real comprehensive immigration reform. One of the things I think that I am grateful for as a Democrat, and I hope if you all are Democrats, for something that you celebrate with me, are the things that we talk about in the Democratic debates, like real immigration reform, like evolution. Sorry, I couldn't help it. And I think on immigration, it's important that it not be couched in the demagoguery that it has been, because it's not the weight of the solution that we do need to ensure that we honor our history as being both a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants. What my mom has said is that, first we need better border security, and that's about security as much as it is about immigration. I live in New York. I don't know how many of you saw the debate in New Hampshire, but ABC congratulated itself that one of its reporters had snuck in 2 suitcases with potentially nefarious material through both the Port of New York and the Port of Long Beach, California. I mean, that's not good for any of us. So as much as so frequently the border security debate is seen only through the prism of the southern border, it's important that we realize that we need to secure all of our borders, and we really need to fully fund the September 11th Commission report recommendations about how to do that this administration has never done. And it's also important to recognize that we need to know who's in this country for not only immigration reform purposes, but also for security purposes. 15 of the 19 hijackers on September 11th were here legally. Initially, some of them were here illegally and they'd overstayed their student visas, but the vast majority had come here legally, but we didn't know they were here, we didn't know where they were. So what she said is she wants to invite everyone out of the shadows, the 12 to 14 million people that we have here illegally, and to be registered. If people have committed a crime in this country or their home country, they'll be deported. If, like the vast majority, they've been here as productive citizens, as working members of our communities, had they been paying taxes, they will pay a fine and then stand in line behind the people who came here legally on a path to earn citizenship. If they haven't been paying taxes, they will also pay a fine, but they will have to pay back taxes as a percentage of their income going forward. I mean, I couldn't pay all of my taxes if I had to pay all of my taxes for the last 15 years or 1 year. And then people will be encouraged to learn English, but she does not support mandating English as our national language. She also wants to aggressively start enforcing our workplace laws. One of the reasons that the debate is so fraught is that people have been exploited. That's not good for the workers who are being exploited, and that's not good for the workers who have lost their jobs because they can't compete in that environment. It's also not good for us as Americans that we have workplace environments like that in our communities. So we want to get back to rigorous workplace enforcement. Another thing that I'm really proud of my mom for having supported twice, and that she sees as being part of comprehensive immigration reform, sort of on the sooner end while we're working through everything else, is something called the DREAM Act. And for those of you who don't know what the DREAM Act is, you nodded, but for those of you who don't know what the DREAM Act is, it guarantees that no child will be denied either admission to college or to graduate school or to federal aid or college-based aid or other scholarship aid as determined by their parents' immigration status. That everyone who can earn a right to go to school in this country and can earn the money that they need to go, we should honor that. And we should absolutely want to enfranchise as many people into our education system as we can. So that's my mom's position on immigration. Next to you, yes. Sure, in the back, yeah.
Yeah. The South Carolina exit poll said that your dad was an influencing reason why people chose Barack Obama. Is his role in the campaign going to change at all because of that? Or do you know what his future plans are as far as being involved? Is he going to be as involved or change at all?
Well, I think my father has advocated for my mom, as have all the spouses of the candidates. And at times, I think all the spouses have said things that are a bit heated because they're defending their spouse, or they're trying to make the case for why they believe the person that they love is best qualified to be president. So I think my father's going to keep doing what he's been doing, which is talking about what's at stake in this election and why, given what he knows about the job, he really believes my mom is most well positioned to do that. And I hope that that's what the media will focus on. I think that they've focused on things even today that he said a few days ago, and that doesn't serve any of us, right? I want to be hearing about the issues from the candidates. I think that that's what voters want to be hearing about. And certainly that's my mom and her campaign, and my dad is part of that. will be talking about. And as we were talking about earlier, I hope that people, judge my mom on the merits of her platform and her strategy and her vision for our country, particularly as young people, and her record for having gotten done what she's committed herself to doing in the Senate and in the 25 years in public life that she had before that. Sure thing.
Did your mother have any ideas for reforming the tax code?
Yes. The question was, does my mom have any ideas for reforming the tax code? Absolutely. I mean, because she's so committed to fiscal responsibility, and if you go to HillaryClinton.com, you can see how she'll pay for everything that she proposes, which is distinctive among her colleagues in the Democratic primary. Of course, because we have to figure out, how we're going to draw more revenue into the government to do that, or kind of what we're going to cut to then move over. For instance, we were talking about college affordability. My mom wants to reform the estate tax code to do that. So under the current administration's tax breaks, the estate tax would be entirely repealed. What my mom has said is that, for families who have assets of $7 million or less, the estate tax would be repealed. And that is important because that would protect a lot of our family farmers, who are frequently the people, because of the value of their land, who get caught in the way this tax actually manifests itself. But the estate tax would not be repealed for people who have assets of $7 million or more. That's 0.3% of Americans. That change, though, would bring about $8 billion back into the federal government. And that is what we need to help expand national service opportunities, to ensure the federal government can lend at lower rates and be repaid on an income contingency basis, to expand the Pell Grant maximum. So absolutely. She also said she wants to go back to the tax rates of the 90s, preserving the middle class tax cuts, but increasing the percentage that people earning more than $250,000 a year pay. That's important because that helps fund directly, along with taking the tax breaks away from oil companies, for energy program entirely. Right? We need that. Ending the war in Iraq will bring home $330 million a day and more than $110 billion a year. That's important because that's what we need to help ensure that everyone is able to take advantage of universal health care. So yes, absolutely. Lots of changes. Yes, ma'am. So the question was about nursing homes and what will my mom do to strengthen regulation around nursing homes, and what penalties will there be for nursing homes who infringe on those regulations. Well, one thing that I'm really proud of my mom for having gotten done during this campaign is expanding assistance to families through respite care insurance, so that families who want to care for their loved ones at home are able to do so through purchasing affordable long-term care insurance to help pay for care in their homes, or are able to take advantage of an expanded Family Medical Leave Act so that they themselves can be caregivers. I think that will also help alleviate some of the pressure on the nursing home system. What she has said in terms of the nursing home system itself is that we need better regulation. I mean, some of it is up to the states, and so there's also disparities in standard across the states. And on this, like in our civil rights department, we need better enforcement. Even in the regulations that we have, they're not currently been enforced. So it's a hybrid of both sort of needing smarter and more universal regulations, ensuring that there's transparency around them, so people who are in nursing homes can hold them accountable, families can hold them accountable, as well as communities, but also ensuring that we're enforcing what we have already on the books. In terms of specific penalties, I don't know, but I think she addresses that on the website, and if not, we'll take your name and get back to you with a more specific answer. Yeah, sure. In the back. She's on record as having supported what former Secretary General Kofi Annan had proposed in reforming the United Nations, both in terms of the incremental reforms he had proposed, as well as in terms of the process by which more nations would be enfranchised into not only reforming the United Nations itself as we think about it, at the secretariat level in New York, but also it's kind of various organs like the World Health Organization and others. So she would want to start a process like that. And one of the reasons, unfortunately, that process didn't go anywhere is the reticence of this administration. So, absolutely. Sure. Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, my mother, I think, as any of the major candidates running would tell you, of course they're committed to American sovereignty. It's funny that you're the second person who's asked me that in the last 24 hours. So yeah, I hadn't heard that until recently, but I don't think that that's a real concern. I've never heard it come up in the debates, and I've never actually heard now in the hundreds of questions I've answered for my mom, and in the hundreds and hundreds I've heard her answer, did that come up except for the last couple of days. So.
This was going to be our last question.
Oh, we're back. All right, go. My mom has voted on the stem cell research bill twice, and the president has not signed it twice. And she said that one of the first things that she would do as president would be to sign the stem cell research bill that has passed and not, unfortunately, kind of made it off the current Oval Office desk. And that's important not only for funding stem cell research, which is profoundly important for all of us, but also in sending the signal that the war on science is over and that we're back in the business of investing in innovation. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Please vote. I want to vote my mom.